as you may know, because it was announced to the list, Stefan Haakensen, who has been the chair of the WebRTC Working Group for 7 years, is stepping down, and we want to wish him the best. He made many, many contributions to the working group, and we will miss him. So it's just Harold and me at this point. Just a reminder that we are meeting on October the 22nd, Monday, and Tuesday the 23rd for TPAC in Lyon. So hopefully many of you will be able to make it.
I will be there. I haven't gotten tickets yet.
So this is a reminder that we have a very early draft of WebRTC next version use cases, and we would like people to take a look at it. We've had a few reviews, a few issues filed, and thank you for those who have read it and commented on it. But we would like more people to take a look at it and file issues so we can move forward on it and improve it. And here are a few of the comments that people have made. And so you may want to take a look at it, see what's so horrible about it.
I will note that I got all the way to the second requirement before filing an issue on it.
Oh, okay.
So remember that unless you file issues, it's likely that these requirements will be what we're working from. You might want to make sure you agree with that. Turn off the music.
Thank you. Thank you for the musical interlude. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some media capture screen share issues, as well as some WebRTC PC issues. So I'm going to music. Jan Ivar, but please turn off the music. Thank you. Jan Ivar.
Yes. Okay. So issue 28 for screen capture has to do with permissions. The spec already mentions permissions, but we need some additional language in the permission spec. Special circumstances for, or differences, I should say, from camera and microphone and screen share is that the spec, our spec specifically forbids granted permissions, but denied permissions are okay. And for those of you who've seen the drop-down in Firefox and wondered why there's a checkbox for remember this decision, when you check it, it says Firefox does not allow permanent access. The reason for that is you can still hit the don't allow button. Maybe not the best UX, but that's why. So that means we need a new permission name. So in addition to camera and microphone, we're proposing display. Screen was the runner-up, but display seems to be reasonable. As I mentioned, get user media spec already, the algorithms already assume this, so there's already language in display there in the screen sharing spec. There's also already text that says the use agent must not create a permission storage entry with a value of granted. So hopefully that should be sufficient. So the open questions is whether this is sufficient to cover both video and any related audio, or I think Martin suggested that it would be not necessary to have independent audio and video for this, and I tend to agree. Because the effect would be basically that if you block one, you block both. And I think there's a separate slide about audio, and I guess there's a question if there's even an audio-only use case for this. But so for now, the recommendation is to just have a simple entry for display that would cover existing video and future audio. And it's still the use agent's responsibility to explain in prompts what's being shared. So this again is only the only part that's needed in the permission spec for this is to be able to persist blocked grants basically, and to fulfill the permission algorithms otherwise. And yeah. That's it.
So are there any objections to what Jan Ivar has outlined here for interaction with permissions? Okay, so Harold, I guess you can put down that people seem to agree with Jan Ivar's suggestion on issue 28.
Okay.
I should mention there's a similar moniker needed in feature policy for iframes. You would, in order for your get user media already to work in Chrome, you're probably doing in an iframe. You're probably doing iframe and then allow equals, and then a string that has camera semicolon, microphone semicolon, and then similarly we would need a display. We'd propose display there as well. There's already.
Makes sense.
Okay, cool.
So Jan Ivar to draft text for both for permission.
Permissions and feature policy?
Right.
You agree, Jan Ivar? Okay.
Good.
Okay. Recording. Yeah. Okay. Next.
Okay, Henrik.
All right, the audio. So I made a proposal earlier, but that I think was premature. I listed some use cases. They're basically variations if you want to share a video, including the audio in a presentation. You could also have,
Well, why don't you start over? Sorry about that, Henrik. I don't know what's going on here.
Okay, should I go now?
Yeah.
Right. So use cases. Typical use case would be you're holding a presentation and you want to share like some audio and video clip. But I can imagine doing audio only if you share music like that. Right. So I before I made a proposal where I thought, keep things simple. Let's just share all the audio. But talking to some people about different ways people want to implement this, and even the limitations of the OS, like something like share system audio might not even be possible on all operating systems, and there's extensions where you opt in or out audio, depending on the window or tab. And when I realized some of the technical constraints and the differences between OSS and how a browser might want to do this differently, I thought that we should say as little as possible as what audio is included, and to unblock all the future audio related working constraints. I wanted to define that get display media with the audio constraints to true leaves it pretty much completely up to the implementation what audio sources are included. Similar to how, if you do get user media with the audio, it doesn't say which input device. It's up to the implementation, or if it's a good picker, it's up to the user. Does that sound like a good starting point? I have another slide about echo-related issues.
Well, I guess as a starting point, sure. Is the goal to enumerate the audio constraints that we expect to use in the screen sharing spec?
To enumerate? What do you mean?
Right now, there's still a PR to list specifically the constraints we'll support for video with height, frame rate, I believe, and the other logical monitor and the new ones. Are we going to have a similar list for audio constraints?
I imagine it's a case-by-case basis. What constraints we want there?
When you say case-by-case, do you mean we should not specify it?
No, I think we should specify constraints that we want. Like, okay. We shouldn't automatically allow an audio constraint.
Right.
Because I think most of them might not make sense.
So I have some concerns. I don't know if the other slides will cover it, about what should happen, because you mentioned it might vary a lot by source, whether a source has audio or not. And for some sources, like other applications, we might not even be able to implement capture of audio from other applications.
Yes.
So My concern is that as a way to signal, I'm guessing a web app that doesn't expect audio should not receive it. So it makes sense to use audio:true to say that I would like audio. Does that mean I want audio or fail, or does it mean I would like audio if you have, please?
I think it should mean I want audio if you have it,
Right.
and if you don't have it, you could get like a silent audio stream.
So
Okay.
produce an audio stream, and if you don't have any sound to put into it, just in silence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that preferable to just returning a stream with only a video track?
If the implementation guarantees that it's only video, then maybe. But I mean, I've seen suggestions to have a picker where you pick one tab and then in the middle of the call you just switch to another tab. Think of cases where you start with no audio and then you have audio later, and it's good to have an audio track.
Speaking of audio tracks.
Yeah.
Right. So at least in Get Display Media, audio true means return failure if there is no audio. So if the browser, for browsers that do not implement it, they would fail, I guess.
So I think that's up for discussion. At first I thought yes, but when I thought about how a picker might be, it's really up to the user what audio to include. I thought it would make sense to produce silence anyway, similar to how you can mute a microphone. Because if you, or for example, if you want to share a window, and I think the application can say I'm interested in both audio and video, but if you're on an operating system or an implementation where it's not possible to give you that audio, I don't think if you end up failing, then we need to have a lot of mechanisms for probing what's possible, which means then maybe you have to have different constraints. And what I'm thinking is when you just say get display media, the user hasn't made their choice yet.
Right.
Like so if you say that you have to be able to support audio, then you have to exclude the window option, even though the user might be happy with that.
I think silence would be good. I guess the only question begs is if there should be a way for the web app to know that it's a silent track. I guess that's for future. Yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay.
So just for sorry, a clarifying question there right now, because existing implementations today, if you put in audio colon true, that'll just be ignored, right?
Right.
So there might be a problem for backwards compatibility. If you did this today with video true and audio true, you would get back a stream that only has a video track, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So maybe for backwards compatibility, we would need to continue that.
Right. So so in that would be that would be an argument for not returning a silent audio stream if we can ensure that there will never be any audio. In the case of you've never implemented this,
right.
And that's true. On the other hand, are we in a stage where we have to worry about backwards compatibility? Like this spec is pretty fresh.
I believe Edge already implements it.
Yeah, we ignore audio true, but I don't know that it's that big a deal. I mean, if you ask for it and don't get anything, you can kind of assume it doesn't support it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, other implementations, if we decide this now, could change. We could easily change Firefox to throw an error on audio true.
And I want to leave it sort of very open to the implementation because do different things with audio. If you just flat out reject something, if you can't have audio, then I think the application would have to prod a bunch of different capabilities, or just decide for you before you make a call. Like if audio is important, it might have some logic where it says like, okay, we're not gonna include window capture. But I think if the application tries to filter out user choices instead of the implementation doing that for you, you could end up in a state where, even though a certain browser supports sharing an audio or sharing a particular window, you would just discard that because whatever implementation you were aiming for didn't have that. I want to keep everything choices freely, and then if we need to support the case where you have to support audio, then that should be a separate constraint. If you just say I want audio, then it's up to the implementation.
So the audio true is ignorable, and can I record that as a decision?
Can you repeat that?
Audio true is ignorable, right, Henrik?
Huh? Audio true
is ignorable.
So the get display media can succeed whether or not it's going to serve up audio.
I think so, but it should give you I think it should give you a silent track.
Well, that's
if it's supported.
No, if
well, when you say giving a silent track, you mean a guarantee of returning an audio track.
Yeah.
That's not ignorable.
No. Yeah. I think if we don't have to care about backwards compatibility, then audio should mean you get an audio track.
So if you don't support audio, you always get a.
Yeah, in order to be standard conformant, you have to support an audio. You have to support generating a silent audio track. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And Ivar, do you have a strong opinion either way?
Well, I mean that we'd have to implement that, of course. That's not how our implementation works at the moment.
It's the same for Edge.
Yeah. Well, and I guess Safari, right, Yuan?
Yeah, this is Yuan. So having to implement a silent audio track would seem really odd, and then developers need to use web audio to detect that it's silent, or would it be just muted? That seems great for developers and not great for implementers because it's adding code for nothing.
Right.
So,
yeah, and then the developer still has to figure it out, right?
So,
what are the downsides against having it be ignorable? Meaning that you get a stream with just a video track if there is no audio,
and
or if it's not
very discoverable. That's
we could make it optional. I just don't want to require that audio is always present, because you might want to enable or disable audio after you've already accepted the request. You're switching tab, or you're clicking some button in the UI to unmute or something.
How would that happen? I mean, if the user picks a source, and you're saying that there might not be an audio. Well, if there's a source that the browser thinks might have audio later, in that case, it's free to create a silent track, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe for example, I get the request, and the usage, I choose to share a window. The operating system doesn't allow me sharing any audio there, but during the call, the browser has some UI that lets me say like, no, I want to share a tab now. I'm just changing the source, and in that case, now I do have audio, and that should just start producing stuff. So the application needs to have access to a track. However, if the implementation, will never support audio, and there's no use case for this, then I don't really care either way if you get an audio track or not.
Right.
But so it's like if we want to make it easier for people not to implement this, then that's fine.
Yeah, so
But
how about if you support audio, you should always have an audio track.
yeah,
And if
So,
you don't, you don't.
let's say you ask for screen, and you're only supporting audio for tab, for instance, then it would make sense that in the first case there's no audio track, and in the second case there's an audio track.
yeah. So I was imagining a browser that lets you switch source on the fly.
With which API?
What? No API. A user action. You have a UI that's part of the browser that says, I want to switch to sharing this tab now.
I don't think that's compatible with get display media, get user media model.
Right,
because,
it isn't now.
Because once you pick a source, there are JavaScript observable properties of that source. And if they change from under you, I think that violates the spec in some way. Like we had this with front and back cameras on phones. And the way around it, I guess, would be to make a virtual device that is the combination of the two, and then you could maybe change which way the camera is facing based on the device, the facing mode constraint. But no one's gone that way as far as I understand.
What's the concern with switching? Is it the label, the window tab? So I've heard of proposal to switch which tab is being captured, and that would only seem like it changes size. But
So for instance, we could envision that for camera. You have the background and the foreground cameras, and we could envision the browser to have a switch so that you don't need to any JavaScript to actually switch off devices. That Get User Media is providing you visibility through constraints, user environment, and it's attached to different devices, so the device ID will be somehow different. So yeah, the model for camera is to basically go back to Get User Media.
Yep.
and what's the concern with the get display media? Like, what's the problem if suddenly you get frames from a different window?
Because a lot of we expose media capability, expose current settings. Now, current settings you might expect to change, but you might not expect the envelope, the capabilities to change. And it makes it hard for the web app to make assumptions, I guess, when everything can change under it.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to move on from this issue.
Okay.
But the question is, what did we agree on?
Right. So, well, the starting point being that audio true, that the implementation can decide the audio sources when you say audio true.
Well, I like Yuan's point that since the end user is going to pick a source, if they pick a source that will never have audio, I think we should return a stream with just a video track and no audio track.
Right.
Because anything else is just confusing.
Okay, that's fine.
But
Can we write that down, Harold, as well? All right.
But it would still succeed, I guess.
Okay.
Right. Well, there was another slide, which is a separate issue.
I don't know.
Move on.
Oh,
I had one more question about the audio constraint. What happens if you only provide the audio constraint?
So if you only provide audio constraint and you don't have audio, I think it should fail. If you ask for both audio and video, then video is still useful. But
I like that.
We might also want to check audio true and audio sample rate, these kind of things, whether this applies or not. If we start writing the proposal, there might be some properties that you want or not to have as well.
Right, so this second proposal, if we're moving on, is if you're doing this conference and you're sharing and there's remote participants, you don't want to, if you're sending a audio video stream back to them, you don't want it to include their voices, because then you get, you hear yourself and you hear other people twice. So I proposed, we can skip my previous proposal, but the new proposal is, the starting point is still that if you say you don't want to have, like if you want to avoid audio, what you do is you exclude the requesting tabs audio. So if you include this constraint, then again, starting point is still implementation does whatever it wants. So you can get any audio, but you cannot get audio that includes the requesting tabs audio. So for example, if you're doing tab capture, then an implementation can return only that audio, or the implementation can return like any other, like the full browser Windows audio, as long as it doesn't contain this audio that would cause echo. And it's up to the implementation to filter out what user choices are available. But if we don't have a constraint to limit this, then the user might choose the wrong thing, and then you get the remote participants hear themselves. And I don't think we should present the user with choices that aren't valid.
Is the use case for this recording a WebRTC call?
Yes, it's if you're screen sharing to people who are talking on your screen, and they playing it out for themselves.
Okay, that sounds like a special use case, though. I know some sites use this. Appear.in uses screen sharing to record their session, but I believe in those cases, I would argue you don't really need tap audio capture, because you already have the audio, and you could probably do with web audio and other means to get that audio that will give you more control. I worry that this gets a little into a specific use case, and it's not clear what the application is, and it doesn't seem to apply in other use cases.
I mean, wouldn't the primary use case of a screen sharing API, if we include audio, be presentations and stuff like that, right? Like anything, like in this use case, when we're doing this presentation, I would hear myself if the host was including audio from the call.
Well, presumably they would share they would either share the PowerPoint application, or they would share a browser tab, their browser window.
Right. Well, if their browser window includes me talking, then I'll hear myself.
Well, maybe you could have two browser windows, and it would know to have audio from not one and not the other.
Right. So there are workarounds, but there's no way to guarantee that the user doesn't pick the wrong choice and get echo and think it's a bug with the application.
I think we'll need to cut off the discussion so we can move on and just say, well, we're going to study this further. So Jan-Ivar, number 62.
Yeah, so this was assigned to me. The request on GitHub was that basically Chrome and Firefox both offer the ability for the web app to restrict the sharing choices to desktop, basically full screen, windows, and tabs, etc. Web apps like Google Hangouts use this functionality and would like to keep it. Firefox does not actually support tabs. We had that feature in the past. We disabled it back in the Firefox Hello days. What I would say my suggestion would be to not do this, because the following reasons. Basically, because the spec expressly forbids it. There's already language in there, and this is also why Get Display Media did not support constraints for the longest time until very recently. And we recently reintroduced constraints only thanks to the strong language against letting the application influence the user selection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of agree that, for instance, Hangout might have some UI telling the user, hey, you're in Chrome, the picker is this way, and you might actually click to only get the window this way. And so it can provide context to the user to actually tell him what it will decide as part of the UI of the web page. And we hopefully that's good enough. maybe it will not be the case, and in which case we might want to continue thinking about better ideas. But I would agree with the proposal there to not support that, basically.
Okay.
I'm curious about what the use case is. If it's a matter that they want to have one button for share window, one button for share tab, one button, like they make the picker part of the application's UI, just so that they get the same experience regardless of browser, then I think it's fine. But if they want to add this constraint because they want to avoid, certain choices are problematic because of implementation details like echo, then it's not okay. Then there should be a different constraint.
Well, I can speak to some of the use cases I've heard is that applications want to have a document sharing feature. So they very specifically want to only pick documents. But unfortunately, they would also include Google Documents. And that would require browser sharing, which is the scary one. If you go to the next slide, I basically, I should mention the background here is that not all sources are equally safe. So specifically, any surface that has a browser surface visible on it is extra scary, basically, in that it has very specific security problems that an attacker can use to sidestep the cross-origin protection. The other use case I heard was basically pair that in doing recording of their own WebRTC session, where I believe in Chrome right now they open a window that says "pick me," sort of a workaround.
Yeah, I can see other use cases like it's a help desk, and you actually want to only capture a window that is from a given app. So filtering and only getting the picker with all windows will help somehow the user to pick to limit the choice of the user, which might be good. But again, the web page might have UI to provide guidance to the user so that the picking is done right.
All right. Yeah. So my proposal is also to close this. My next slide was going to be we could probably allow apps to influence choices away from the scary sources, but I think that's a slippery slope a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So do we have agreement on Janivar's recommendation?
Is not to do this?
Yeah.
I'm leaning that way, but I would like whoever requested this to state their reason for it.
So do you think we should go back to GitHub and ask for more feedback and more explanations of the use case before we make a decision?
Yes. But we can sort of say, we close this if we don't get any input.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So that, I hope we recorded that. So
You can skip
this. Okay.
Yeah.
72, Henrik.
Oh, so I think this will be quick. What happens if the window is closed or the monitor is disconnected and the lifecycle of tracks already says that we have this mute, which is for temporary, and ended, which is permanent. And if you close the window, I think you should just change the ready state and fire on ended. Is that okay, people? Or am I missing some nuance? It seemed pretty straightforward.
For window, it makes sense. Yeah. Monitor getting disconnected, I think it makes sense. Although some implementations might want to do something else.
I don't think minimizing should be the same as covering the window.
It should be muted, right? Yeah.
Well, we send black when you minimize the window, but if it's covered, we'll actually send it. Still send it.
So that's a separate point. The first is what to do if it's closed or disconnected, and then the second discussion is what to do with the hidden or covered windows.
So the proposal is to mandate to end the track, or?
Yeah, if the window is closed, we end the track, and if the monitor is disconnected, we end the track.
I think that's probably fine. I can see a point where monitor getting disconnected and reconnected very quickly. For instance, you might want to mute or mute for a minute and something like that. So maybe it's a browser, it's a user agent decision. But for Windows,
we can say may. We can have a recommendation, but leave it up to the information.
Should, yeah.
Good.
I think ended track when the source is irreversibly closed, which I guess closing a window is. I can't imagine other sources that would do that. I think that makes sense. For muted, it's a little unclear. We already overload muted in peer connection to know whether you're receiving bits, and with direction you can change the transceiver direction and you will get muted that way. I guess there's no reason we can't also mute when the source is, but actually, no, we're just talking about muting the track, which actually does not cause muted. Never mind.
Yeah.
I take it back.
So for instance, in Safari, we have UI, user agent UI to actually disable capture. And in that case, we mute the track because there's UI to re-enable it if the user actually wants it.
Yeah.
So we're using mute and mute for that purpose.
Yeah. To clarify, I confused myself. If you mute a track that you're sending, it does not actually cause a remote mute.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's good.
So the question is, do we consider a disconnected monitor irreversibly closed or not?
We will probably implement it as ending the track, but I can see some implementations that might want to mute it and then end it after a minute or something like that, just in case.
I think if we end up in that case, we can have a separate issue for that, unless there's like a big reason to do this.
What about the? Is this going to impact the PowerPoint use case any, where you go to full screen and back? I guess we're assuming that we'll handle that, and it won't fire any of these events.
Yeah, I don't think it would.
Okay.
And then
So did we decide that that we'll mute the track when it's hidden? No,
we never talked about that. We talked about closing a window.
Okay.
Window closed and monitor disconnected. We end track and fire the end of the event.
Yeah. I put a note in notes saying that we should think about the reconnect case some more.
Okay.
There are OSs handle disconnection of monitors differently.
Yeah.
Used to be that you just that they just turned off and they were still present in the drivers, but nowadays monitors can actually go away, and you have no guarantee that they're coming back at the same place.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a bit different from USB cameras as well, because with Get User Media, usually once you're granted access to one camera, even if you're disconnect it and reconnect it, you just call Get User Media again, and there's no prompt. But there, if you end the track, you actually need to call Get Display Media again, which means a new prompt, which might not be very good for users. So that's why I'm, yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to minimized? Right. So the minimized windows. Sorry, which we never. Is so. What I saw in the issue was suggesting that we make it black if it's minimized, and I think that's a valid option. But I also think you could see minimized windows as a special case of it being hidden, because okay, you don't see the window, but that is also the case if you put another window over it, and in that case we don't make it black. So if we want to be consistent with, it's just hidden, it's still being sent, then I think it would make more sense to not do anything and just keep sending frames. And I wanted the group to discuss which option. I prefer not to make it black, because I think that's like muting your stream, and I don't think it might be on purpose to do that. Like if I'm sharing a window, I'm okay with you seeing it. minimizing, I'm probably just context switching rather than me trying to hide it from you.
Yeah, we assumed that when you minimized the window, you wanted it, you didn't want to send it. But covering, I know covering is tricky because it means you can't just screen scrape. But
Yeah, I think it might send the wrong message to the user. If they minimize it and it goes black, they might think, oh, you can't see it when I can't see it. And that's incorrect.
Well, neither of you can see it because it's minimized.
Yeah, right. But then you might think that you can't see my window if I put another window over it. Like it's a fine distinction between minimized and covered.
So I'm a little confused about what the two options are because it sounds like right now browsers are sending black. Is that right?
No.
No?
I don't think for both cases.
Oh, so if you hide, if you minimize a window now, it's still sent.
In Edge, when you minimize it, it sends black. But we have, because we are not screen scraping, you can actually show a covered window. If you select the window, it'll show whether it's covered or not. And that required special operating system functionality to be able to do that. Previously, we weren't able to do that.
So if your window is covered, how do you signal to the user that the window is still captured? Do you have like some?
Well, it's in the picker. The user chose it in the picker. It doesn't matter whether it's covered or not. As long as they chose it in the picker, it's still going to be shown.
Okay, and you do not provide, and there's some other UI to actually show to the user that there's still something being shared?
Well, you're going to see there's a yellow border around what's being shared, but that'll still be there whether it's covered or not.
Okay. When it's minimized, the good thing about mute unmute events is that the JavaScript, or it's about it's very visible from the web applications that something happens, and probably either the user disables get display media or it's minimized and it can react upon it. If it's black frames, then it's more difficult for the web application to understand what's happening again.
Sounds like people like muting when it's minimized.
Yeah.
It could also be up to the browser. Like one browser might explicitly have a mute unmute button, another browser might just rely on minimizing or not minimizing. I don't think we need to make this decision, but we should say that if we're not producing frames for the captured area, we should mute and unmute.
If there's to do the button example though, you could implement the mute button and still that doesn't have to match what you signal to the JavaScript. You can still have the logic so that it's only unmuted when it's both the button's unmute and it's not minimized. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we have agreement that when it's minimized, it should mute. And there might be other cases like a mute button where it's not not generating frames anymore. And in that case, we should mute it too. Is that right?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, there's a special case of covered, which is when the screensaver is kicking on, or when you are actually logging off or something like that. And I did an experiment with Chrome, and Chrome is still capturing, for instance, even though the screen is locked. Even though, and I don't know about Firefox. Maybe Firefox is the same. I'm not quite sure. So there might be. So it might be good for the spec to mention some cases, even though they're like, hey, implementer, please consider these cases like minimized windows, locked screens, and so on, even though there will be no mandatory requirement to implement it in a specific way.
Right.
Sounds good to me. We can list some examples when we mention muting and unmuting and say, these are also cases where you might want to do this.
Henrik, what about audio? Does this apply to audio as well?
I think a good starting point would be that they're both muted and unmuted at the same time.
Well,
I mean,
minimize the
for
window that's
discussion.
playing audio and it's still.
Oh, right.
Right.
I guess you want the audio probably.
Yeah, I think we'll have to think more about that one.
Yeah,
Right.
we can revisit that.
Okay, you win. 77.
Yeah, so hopefully it will be quick and fast. So get display media, I haven't looked at all implementations in browsers, but get display media has the same concerns as get user media. So probably when it's not a second context, by default, it should not be functional. I think we can agree on that. And so in that case, there are like two main options to make get display media not functional in non-secure context. One is to do as get user media. Basically, if the context is not secure, you reject the promise. For other APIs, typically, for instance, service workers APIs and new APIs, the idea is that the method or the function is not exposed at all. So it would mean that in a non-secure context, get display, so navigated or get display media would be undefined, basically. The good thing is that it's consistent with other APIs, like other platform APIs, but it's not consistent with get user media. I would lean toward option 2, personally. And we'll try to see whether we can apply the same thing for get user media, meaning making get user media disappear in non-secure context.
Right. Yeah, I like option 2 for get display media. I think for it's a new API, so we should only expose it where it's useful. And most JavaScript will have to test for the function, the presence of this method anyway. So I like that. Whether we can do the same thing for media capture or get user media, I hope so. But get user media doesn't actually isn't actually secure context only today. Firefox still supports it in HTTP, but we would like to change that to only have it work in secure, only work in HTTPS. But removing it entirely, yeah, I would probably break some websites, but probably not that important. So yeah, I would support that as well.
So if we go down that way, I would make one possibility would be to make navigator.media device is secure context. But maybe you can talk about this
right.
as a follow-up issue.
Yep.
The one thing to mention there might be that feature policy. I don't know if this might be sidetracking us, but feature policy made a different decision when it comes to whether API should be there at all. But I think that's okay. I hope.
Mean like if let's say that we have a third-party iframe which is not allowed to use get user media. So in that case, get user media would not be available at all. Or...
I think in that case it would be available. I think the argument that I heard from feature policy folks that it would be too hard to write JavaScript that would work in all cases. So in that case, it would probably throw an error, security error, or invalid. I forget what the error is.
Yeah, that's what we implemented currently.
So I think that's totally orthogonal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had an iframe that was using HTTP, it would be absent.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So Harold, I think we have option 2 here.
Decision? Option 2.
Option 2. Okay.
Is that only for get display media or?
I think we can talk about.
I think that's a different issue that we have to discuss later.
Yeah.
And I'm all up for consistency. I think these are sibling APIs, but regardless, we can move forward.
Okay. All right. So WebRTC. Let's try to get into these. So 1858 for WebRTC was about what happens when an answerer stops a transceiver that others are bundled on. Just to refresh everybody's memory, when you have a bundle group, say audio and video, the first identification tag is known as a bundle tag. And that identifies the tagged M section, and there's a bunch of things relating to this in bundle. So it says it's recommended that the offer tag section be one that the offerer believes is unlikely that the answer or will reject. How it's supposed to know that, I don't know. It's not implementable. And then in section 733, it says when the answer wants to reject a bundled M section, if it's the offerer tagged one, it can't reject just that M section. It needs to reject the whole offer, reject each bundled M section, or later create an offer to disable it. So that's what's causing the issue here. So basically, when the answer calls transceiver.stop, it's conceivable that this may have to result in rejecting all of the bundled M sections.
Which, if you use bundling, could mean all your transceivers.
Right. So, yeah. So some of the API implementations create offer. Actually, the text in the spec currently doesn't even say which the offer tagged M section is. My understanding is that implementations make that the initial transceiver. So the first time you call that transceiver, that becomes the offer tagged M section. Is that true universally?
I'm not sure it's specified.
Well, I know it's not specified. I'm just trying to figure out what implementations actually do.
It seems like we could observe that and measure that. I'm not sure what the answer is for Firefox.
Okay, so that's my first question is what implementations actually do. So there's some confusion around that. And then the second limitation is that the answerer, without parsing the SDP, can't determine whether the transceiver they're attempting to stop is the one that's offer tagged. So basically,
question for clarification: this stopping a transceiver, this is only a problem between the offer and answer. Like if you're in a stable state, this would never be a problem. Is that correct?
Well, it's basically before the offer and the answer.
Are you sure? Isn't that a problem always?
So the first, if you go back one slide, I think there's a code.
Yeah. Well, so if you're in a stable state, and say the answerer calls transceiver.stop, definitely say on the audio will definitely stop, right? That transceiver is now dead, but he hasn't generated an offer or an answer, right? Because it's already stable. So it's not gonna. I don't think it'll automatically kill the video to call stop on the answer.
It should cause negotiation needed.
Right. It'll cause negotiation needed, and then, well, it depends on which side. So if the answer does create offer, then it'll actually work, right, Harold?
I think so.
Yeah, but if the other side, if the offering peer sends another offer, then it won't. Then basically the answer will come back with both of the M lines zeroed. Is that right? I think so. So anyway, I think your point is correct, Henrik. But it'll still it won't immediately cause confusion, but it will cause confusion perhaps later.
Yeah.
But if you don't stop it, so you complete the answer, and then you make another offer answer where this time you stopped it.
Yeah. So if the answer calls transceiver.stop and then offers, right? That offer will only have the video in it because you stopped the audio, and that can work. If it's the other way, it won't work because then the offer will still offer the audio and the video, and then the answer will have to come back with nothing because he stopped the audio.
Okay. So it will be whenever the next answer is, that will be a problem, regardless of which stage you were in when you stopped it.
So I guess the overall point we're trying to make here is that a lot of confusion around this. It's likely to cause side effects that developers weren't expecting. So what do we do? So recommendation I'd like to make is first try to, if there's commonality among the browsers in terms of what they do, such as making the initial transceiver the bundle tag one, say that. So at least it's consistent. add a note explaining some of these side effects, and then recommend that transceiver.stop only be called when you're doing it on all the bundled transceivers, because otherwise I think it's going to lead to some surprise.
I think I agree with the first two ones. I don't know why you need the third one. I mean, if you have the two first ones.
Well, yeah, you could. I mean, if you have the first two, and if you basically say, hey, this is going to not do what you think it does, then you probably could leave it to the reader's imagination to realize that they probably only can do the third one.
So if I understand correctly,
Or
with
if they're smart, maybe they could figure it. Maybe they could do it in a way that it actually works.
so if I have 3 transceivers and I have bundle, I will know that the first transceiver is the bundled, is the offer tagged.
Well, so that's easy for the offer. The offer will know that, at least if you implement number 1. The answerer, right? Unless he parses the SDP, he doesn't know which is the first one. But if he does, then he can figure it out.
All he can do is get transceivers and get the order that way.
Well, but we don't say in the spec that the order reflects that the first one is always the offer tag. We could say that.
Actually, say the opposite.
Or say the opposite.
I will say that they're always in creation order. So if we create stuff and then if we create some transceivers and then accept an offer, then it's almost certainly going to be a different order.
Sure, but you can still tell what the order is.
You can tell what your order is. Well, sure. I mean, if you bookkeep what was the latest transceiver when I did set remote description, and then after you check, it would be the last one plus 1.
It's the first transceiver you didn't create yourself, right?
Well, not necessarily, because you might have bundled a transceiver on the first M line, or you might not.
Right.
So that would have to be another recommendation if we want to rely on that. Probably better would be if an API actually said which one is the bundled, if it's confusing.
Well, that would be like it would be a property, right, of the transceiver.
Well, I think the best would be so Harold, you're saying that there's no way it could always be deterministic which transceiver it is?
I think it's, the question is, what do you mean by which?
The one that you cannot stop without side effects.
The offer tag.
No, I mean which in the case of, can you find it by indexing into get transceivers?
Well, I think we yes, because get transceivers is ordered, has an order now.
Yes.
Which I think we did in order to be able to. So it seemed to me that we should be able to figure this out. So at least in the case where I haven't created any transceivers ahead of an incoming offer, in that case I can figure it out and assume it's the first one if it's bundling, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That one will work.
But
my current understanding is that Janiver is right, that it would be, because you can only tag a transceiver that you know about, which means the other endpoint must have been the one creating the transceiver, which means it will be the first one that you didn't create.
How do I know it's
unless you match the transceiver, your transceiver to their transceiver.
Right, but then it's you answering. Then.
No, I think
right. Oh, right.
I think the two first recommendations are good. For the third one, my recommendation would be a plague on all the FTPs. I mean, this is just reflecting side effects of using FTP, and we should just document them and move on.
Yeah.
Okay. So sounds like we have agreement on the first two, but not the third. If you can note that, Harold, that'd be great.
So,
Okay.
I mean, I have a site, like if we can confirm that the stop is always going to be problematic, then I think if we don't just throw this API away completely, then yes, we should definitely do this. But I remember Taylor saying that this was only a problem between the offer and answer. And if that's the case, we can just throw an exception in that case and then have no warning in any other case. But if it is the way you say that this will always be problematic, then we can't throw an exception because it will always be problematic.
Yeah, like Harold said, if you do it after a stable state, you'll get on negotiation needed, and then when you do that, depending on which side renegotiates first, it'll still do weird things.
Yeah, in that case, warning, big warnings. Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so Harold, RTC priority type.
So now I'm putting down my note-taker pen.
Yeah. I can take a pen, or who takes a pen?
Okay, Henrik, you have it.
Okay.
So I took up the liberty of changing the subject of the issue because it was wrong.
Right.
Didn't reflect the content. The problem is that RTC priority type is not documented, or what priority does is not documented if simulcast layers have different priorities. So it's defined, well defined between RTP streams that come from different sources. It says so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not defined with what it means between encodings in simulcast. And it's kind of conflicting with the way the simulcast is thought about, in that when we use simulcast, we kind of expect that when we get congestion, we drop layers. While priority was described in such a way that all layers would get some packets through, no matter how rough the congestion was, but only the high priority layers would get all the packets through. So I put in two possible quick fixes, which is kind of, let's not have this problem, and one slow fix. And what the quick fix are either we claim that all encodings in a simulcast group must have the same priority. Well, that's compatible with not specifying priority, which is what we do today. It looks kind of silly. Another quick fix would be to move the priority to the sender object and say that it's actually a sender property. That breaks compatibility, which is a bad thing, but it doesn't look as silly. And of course, a bit slower fix is to actually define what behavior we want out of priority when it's different across encodings. I found after reading through the slides, after writing this one, that this actually has some relationship to the issue of simulcast that we encounter a little further down the deck. But do anyone have a strong preference for either of these three solutions?
I just me personally, Harold, I like your quick fix number 2.
Mm-hmm. The bad thing about quick fix number 2 is that it blocks us from ever. It doesn't necessarily. You can still have priority per layer if we have but have an override in sender.
Because I personally don't see the value of having a priority per layer, but has this been implemented? I'm just wondering if there is a backward compatibility problem in simulcast.
I don't think, as far as I know, it's not. And I don't know what the use case would be.
Yeah, I guess my only problem with number 2 might be if for non-simulcast cases, would it break backward compat?
And so, shall we make a decision to move on with quick fix number 2 and and anyone who has implemented it can object. Searching for objections and implementation.
Sounds good to me.
And make the order.
Yeah.
Yes. It sounds good to me. I have questions about the details of where you place this. If this is a matter of putting it in a different dictionary, or if you put it as an attribute.
Yeah, I think we'll have to get into that detail.
But I think that's
later.
details. Just the idea of having a per sender priority sounds good to me.
1896, Harold. Let's try to do at least one more.
So that was one that caused me to say that okay, priority might actually make sense, but not this priority. So, and Bernard found some cases where APIs or specs imply different treatment based on order. In particular, if an application asks for more simulcast layers than we support, then we drop the tail ones. And there's a prohibition against changing the order. But there wasn't a clear statement that the order in the encodings in the group parameter was the order from the array. So that was kind of clear. So it was also clear that there doesn't seem to be a best way of doing it. So the proposal is that the proposal I wanted to make is that order is consistent, and we state a rule about simulcast layers are truncated from zero, and we state a rule that says which order simulcast layers are dropped in. And might want to reinstate priority in order to make that decision and to influence that decision, but we shouldn't require any particular ordering. Does this make sense?
Well, I guess, and my question would be, Harold, is it in practice, does anybody change their congestion behavior based on order today? Well,
what I know is that we have that inside Chrome we have a fixed order, and we drop the biggest layer first.
Right, that's what we do. That's what we've done as well.
But I think we actually have the highest layer, the biggest layer, listed first.
Mm.
So we're not consistent.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense to drop the biggest one first, though, just from the multiplicative decrease principle. I'm just worried about would this start affecting congestion control stability if someone put it in the other order and you started dropping the smallest one or something.
That's why I want to have congestion. Congestion control is the envelope.
Yeah, my only concern is this going to create a lot of complexity for implementers and for no real developer value.
I think I agree with the first two ones, so we can do those at least.
Those are in the spec actually today, so
good.
We have to make sure that this is actually captured in the layers of the spec.
Yeah.
So Harold, your proposal is to allow web developers to define a particular order on the dropping of layers.
Right.
Yeah. I think maybe at least for this version, WebRTC 1.0, we let user agent decide that and have a fixed approach, which is drop the highest layer first and so on.
That seems better to me as well.
Seems so basically, I guess you're saying we would say basically the ordering, essentially the browser makes its decision based on its own sorting. And the ordering, you'll say the ordering doesn't affect congestion behavior. Is that something we could say?
can't think of an interrupt case that an application would need to.
Yeah, I can't think of one, and I can think of a zillion bugs that could happen.
The bad thing with APIs is that if you expose too much control, then you're also given up on you're giving up control to the application. Now the application has to do it.
Right.
Yeah, that's the.
It
Yes,
ties the hand of the browser.
yes, most guns can also be used as shotguns. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I hear consensus that the congestion control should not be affected by the order.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So we
but
don't.
the order is not defined as long as it's consistent. Or what was the
Currently,
takeaway?
we say we don't define it, but we say it has to be. You can't change it in the sense that you can't set parameters, can't move it. But I guess the additional thing that we may be saying here is, don't expect the order to affect congestion control behavior.
But so just to be clear, so the order you specify them in enter and see versus the order you should see them in get parameters.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, this is.
So that's yet another question.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I got confused. Strike the last one.
So you're not asking that question, Jennifer?
Well,
we don't even say that it affects the order in the SDP.
Yeah, we might want to say that.
Maybe.
So that seems like a reasonable thing to say. So have you got that, Henrik? I think that one we should say.
That transceiver order should be the same, or that it doesn't
It
matter?
should be reflected in the SDP.
It should or it shouldn't?
Should.
Okay.
But then it doesn't affect congestion control behavior.
It's really hard to listen and type at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a bit terrible. But I wrote that the sending coding order should be reflected in SDP, but it should not affect the congestion control. And
Right.
I've also written down somewhere that it should be consistent, but it's not well defined what the order is. Does that make sense?
I think that's what we just decided. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're out of time. So there's still a few we haven't gotten to. But thank you, everybody, for your patience regarding this little DOS attack that we had. And hopefully we can figure out what to do to avoid it.
Switch to Hangouts?
Among other things, that may be what we'll have to consider. Okay.
Let's consider.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.